1.7 million internally displaced persons, 75% of Gaza. 17,000 children. Behind this number, a face, a name, a girl, a boy. Somebody's child, left unaccompanied or separated. On 26 June, the Integrated Food Security Phase, classification IPC, reported that a high risk of famine persists across the whole of Gaza Strip. This is 96% of the population in Gaza Strip that face high levels of acute food insecurity through September 2024. Over 495,000 are still facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, my name is Stavros Lambrinidis. I'm the European Union Ambassador to the United Nations, and it's a real pleasure for me to welcome you all to the call to action for the children of Gaza and the West Bank. Close to 40 countries in the past 48 hours here in New York have signed up to the call of action. This is remarkable. And we will be keeping it open for another week, so there's plenty of time for others to sign on as well. The European Union is honored to be co-organizing this event with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and the Kingdom of Belgium, a humanitarian flagship event during ECOSOC humanitarian segment. Friends, we are devastated and humbled by the dire and catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza and the worsening situation in the West Bank, and by the fact that children have been disproportionately affected by the hostilities and by the violence. It is a common duty, a common responsibility to act upon the humanitarian imperative to save and preserve children's lives, to uphold their rights and freedoms, and to act always in the best interest of the child. Close to 14,000 Palestinian children have been killed since 7 October. Many more have been injured, and an unknown number are still under the rubble. Before I give the floor to my dear colleague and friend, Philippe Kridelka, let me just ask for a true minute of silence to show respect and to transmit our condolences to their families. Thank you. Philippe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stavros. My dear colleagues, at the European Humanitarian Forum in March, the European Union and Belgium announced an emergency call to action for the children of Palestine. Today, at the heart of the United Nations, we invite member states, you, UN entities, other international organizations and civil society to support the 5 specific demands in this call. 1, we call on all parties for reaching an immediate ceasefire. 2, we call for the respect of international law, including international human rights law and humanitarian law. Respect for international law. 3, any grave violations against all children, including killing of children, should end. We call for the immediate, safe and unconditional release of all detained children and hostages in particular. Killing the children should end. 4, we call for safe and unrestricted humanitarian access to and within the Gaza Strip. All access crossings must be opened. Safe and unhindered movement for humanitarian workers and supplies across the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank must be guaranteed. safe humanitarian access. And 5, we pledge to support a scaled-up UN-coordinated and principled humanitarian response to the Palestinian children in Gaza and in the West Bank. This with a focus on life-saving assistance and services, healthcare, mental health and psychological support, education, humanitarian cash support, and specific support for unaccompanied Palestinian children. A scaled-up UN-coordinated humanitarian response. The call to action for the children of Palestine complements the call for action urgent humanitarian response for Gaza, co-organized by Jordan, Egypt, and the United Nations on the 11th of June in Jordan. We will hear later during our gathering our respected colleague Ambassador Mahmoud of Jordan, and I will now give the floor to the organizers for the continuation of the program. Thank you for your attention.
نكذب حالنا انه بنقول انه احنا بخير، بس احنا عن جد مش بخير. مرة كنا نايمين في مدرسة انصراط، قصفوا مخبز جنبينا، قصفوا كل الشطيات وفي ماتوا منا شهداء كثير في المدرسة ومعاناة كثير كنا، واحنا حكينا خلص هذا الليلة انه احنا نموت خلص، انه توقعنا انه هذه الليلة رح نموت، انه من قصفوا صاروخ على الصف نفسه. يعني كل الشطيات اجوا على الصف اللي كنا احنا فيه، كنا اكثر خوف عشناه في انصراط. واكثر معاناه عشناها انه الاغسال الاكل مش نظيف، او المعلبات بيقولوا منيحه بس مش منيحه المعلبات. المي بنروح بنوقف دور بس وصلنا دور ممكن نتخلص المي، بنروح على المخبز بنوقف الدور بخلص المخبز. هذا معاناه عشناه كثير في الحرب. انه اكثر رساله حابه اوصلها للعالم انه يحسوا فينا احنا عايشين كثير اشي صعب في الحياه، وكمان بدنا حدا يحمينا، بس انه نحس احنا في امان. اكثر هيك مش رح اطلب منكم.
أنا اسمي نازحة من السجاعية، نزحت على انصارات. في انصارات صار قصف كثير، يعني قصفوا وهددوا مجمع الرز اللي جنبينا، اجت الشظايا كلها يعني علينا والحجار كثير تصاوب في المدرسة، حتى في المدارس ما كناش حاسين يعني في أمان. بعدين من انصارات نزحنا على الدير. يعني المعاناة اللي أنا شفتها عانيت كثير أشياء. شعورنا واحنا يعني في ليل بنسمع صوت قصف دمار، يعني نحسش بالأمان لأنه في خيمة احنا يعني نايلون. الأكل كله يعني مش صحي، أساساً الحياة تاعتنا كلها ملوثة من وراء المعلبات. أختي وأخوي يعني في المعدة عانوا كثير من هاي المعلبات لأنه فيش غيرها، السوق كله غالي، حتى المياه مش صحية اللي إحنا بنشربها. التحدي اللي أنا واجهته في حياتي هي تعبئة المياه. بنتعب رايحين الصبح بنعبى مياه وفي الليل بنعبى مياه، وقت يعني طول اليوم تعبئة مياه، أحياناً بنلاقيها وأحياناً ما بنلاقيهاش. حيصير لي سنة أنا لسه يعني مش خشة مدرسة، وسنة حلمي كله راح، اتدمر حلمي. كان عندي هدف، وبعد لما صارت الحرب يعني راح الهدف تبعي. صار هدفي هالجيت إنه تخلص الحرب، بدي أرجع يعني على بيتي. بيت اتدمر، طلعنا من تحت القصف. يعني كتابي أنا اشتقت له، دفتر اشتقت له وأنا يعني في البيت وأنا بتعلم في المدرسة كمان. اشتقت لكل حاجة حلوة في مدرستي. إحنا بنطالبكم إنكم تقفوا معانا كأبنائكم يعني، وتحلونا وتوقفوا هاي الحرب. إحنا تعبنا كتير في هاي الحرب.
Ladies and gentlemen, in March this year, together with the Belgian presidency of the European Union, we launched the Call for Action for Children in the West Bank and Gaza, in front of over 1,400 humanitarian actors at the European Humanitarian Forum. In the months since then, the desperate situation in Gaza and the West Bank has only continued to worsen. Out of all this devastating suffering, it is the suffering of children that is perhaps the most unbearable. These innocent young Palestinians have been robbed of the fundamental rights of childhood, from an education to a place to call home. The statistics are harrowing. So far, 14,000 children in Gaza have died, and 12,000 have been injured, while at least 17,000 children are estimated to be unaccompanied or separated from their parents. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, children are suffering disproportionately from a rise in violence due to settler attacks, incursions by Israeli security forces, and increasing forced displacement. These children desperately need our help. But they deserve more than just survival. They deserve safety and hope. In short, they deserve a normal childhood. The call for action aims to mobilize international support to answer this urgent cry for help, scaling up humanitarian assistance with a focus on Palestinian children, calling for an immediate ceasefire, for respect of international law, including international humanitarian law, for immediate and unconditional release of all detained children, for safe and unrestricted humanitarian access across the Gaza Strip, and for a scaled-up, UN-coordinated humanitarian response for Palestinian children. I urge you to join this call and pledge your support. Let me be clear. The EU will continue to work with its partners to provide immediate relief. In the face of devastation and despair, we stand firm alongside the Palestinian children. I hope you will join us in this commitment. Thank you.
Dear friends, for almost 9 months, the people in Gaza and the West Bank have been living in constant fear of violence, deprived of their most basic needs. As in all wars, children suffer first and suffer most. According to the latest reports by UNICEF, 14,000 children have been killed. Thousands are missing under the rubble. More than 10,000 are orphaned, and at least 17,000 children are separated from their families. Many children are suffering from psychological trauma, emotional distress. For the past 9 months, no child has had any formal education, as relentless bombing and hostilities has damaged or destroyed nearly 90% of all school buildings. In the West Bank, Israeli forces and settlers are becoming more violent. Fear has become a part of children's everyday life. Many are scared to walk to school or play outside. The international community is failing the children of Palestine. We are failing to keep them safe. We are failing to provide them their basic needs. We are failing to give them hope for the future. We cannot abandon them now. That is why, together with EU Commissioner Lenarčič, I am calling for urgent action for the Palestinian children in Gaza and the West Bank. I commend the incredible work that is already being done by all people and organizations dedicated to try and protect children, to provide education, to meet their basic needs. They need our full support. Belgium has been a long-standing supporter of UNRWA's education in emergencies response and will remain so. Even wars have rules. International humanitarian law must be respected by all parties to the conflict. It is of critical importance that perpetrators are held accountable for the violations committed against children. Belgium therefore continues to support a global monitoring and reporting mechanism for children and armed conflict, and the Secretary General's report on children in armed conflict that clearly documents the alarming rate of violations against children in Israel and Palestine. The only way to stop the unspeakable suffering of children in Israel and Palestine is to stop the violence. I repeat our call for a sustainable ceasefire, for the unconditional release of remaining hostages, and for a significant scaling up of much-needed humanitarian aid. I welcome Resolution 2735 of the Security Council and call on all parties to seize this opportunity and move towards a lasting peace. We cannot surrender.
Today, I address you with a heartfelt plea that echoes the cries of the children of Palestine. A generation enduring unimaginable horrors despite the protections guaranteed under international law. We extend our heartfelt thanks to the European Union and Belgium for their efforts and support to organize this conference. In just 9 months, over 16,000 children in the West Bank and Gaza have been killed. 22,000 have become orphans, with a devastating 3% losing their both parents. More and more statistics that you are all aware of reveal that innocent souls have been forcibly displaced, their homes destroyed, their futures shattered. The purpose of this meeting is to highlight the suffering of Palestinian children, mobilize financial support for humanitarian and relief operations, and garner support to stop the war in Gaza, halt the hostilities. In the West Bank, many children have been detained, their childhood stolen behind bars, while in Gaza, children have been torn from their families by the war. Countless children endure the silent torment of anxiety and depression, their young minds scared by relentless violence. And the recent attack on elderly women in Gaza by dogs highlight the ongoing brutality. And I guess every one of you has saw this video. The number of children whose body remains under the rubble, estimated at more than 10,000, underscores the severity of the crisis. Survivors return to their destroyed homes, unable to bury their loved ones, while the injured and wounded suffer without access to proper medical care. 98% of Gaza's children are denied access to safe drinking water, a basic human right stripped away in contravention of international law. The statistics reveal that a high percent of the victims are children and women. This is a reflection of Gaza's demographic reality, where over 50% of population are children or teenagers. We call upon the international community to act swiftly and decisively to protect and provide urgent humanitarian aid to children of Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. Their suffering demands more than sympathy. It demands action. We must ensure that the children you saw in the film have a chance at life, to learn and to dream for a better life and a better tomorrow. If you ask any child in Gaza, just 4 years old and starving, whether they want a parcel of food or the war to stop, their answer will be to stop the war, because all the money in the world will not compensate for losing a part of their body, their mother or father, or even their entire extended family that has been killed. Let us not remembered as bystanders to this tragedy. Let us remembered as the voices of hope, the champions of peace, and the guardians of humanity. You can make a difference. You can bring an end to the suffering and pave the way for a future where every child, regardless of nationality or circumstance, can thrive in safety and peace. Thank you.
Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, what painful testimonies we just heard, what moving testimonies we just heard from Nada and Reem, and what strong calls for action, voices of hope, champions of peace, among many that our distinguished excellencies have outlined. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Edem Wosonu. I'm the Director of Operations in OCHA, and I'm honored and humbled to chair this panel. Before opening the discussion with our panelists, let me share a few reflections, often reinforcing the points that have already been made. Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. We are observing this year the 75th year of the Geneva Conventions, yet the situation in Gaza and West Bank remains utterly bleak. Let me share a few figures that again have been highlighted. 1.7 million internally displaced persons, 75% of Gaza. 17,000 children. Behind this number, a face, a name, a girl, a boy. Somebody's child, left unaccompanied or separated. On 26 June, the Integrated Food Security Phase, classification IPC, reported that a high risk of famine persists across the whole of Gaza Strip. This is 96% of the population in Gaza Strip that face high levels of acute food insecurity through September 2024. Over 495,000 are still facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. By the time you get to catastrophic levels, phase 5, you are on the brink, and death is indeed at your doorstep. The extent of suffering in particular is unconscionable. The full extent of violations and the deep physical and psychological harm they have caused to children's lives, families, and communities, impossible to comprehend. But we cannot become desensitized to human suffering, and we cannot lose sight that the ultimate aim of international humanitarian law is indeed to minimize civilian harm. Under international humanitarian and human rights law, I'm just reinforcing points that have earlier been made, children must be protected, treated humanely, and have their specific needs and vulnerabilities factored into military operations. We have grave concerns about the commission of serious violations in the OPT and conditions in which children are being forced to survive. Again, the powerful words and images of Nada and Reem in our minds, in our hearts, as we move ahead with this session today. We must do more for these children, for all children. We must act to ensure that their tomorrow is much, much better than today.